Hey guys, I'm Drew Davis with Every Arkansan Arkansas Dream Center City Serve, and today it's a little bit different kind of video because we want to talk about what's going on in the world. And I brought my wife of 24 years, Kristi, into this conversation because I think so much of the problems that are going on, we've got to address in our homes, in our personal lives, so that they can reflect that out there in the real world. As T.D. Jakes says, we're in kind of a spiritual pandemic and it starts at home. And I think it's very important for me to say this because I'm a person that normally doesn't talk about these kind of things in a public setting. It was stated recently that not talking about these things is oftentimes the same thing as that parent that watches another parent abuse a child and doesn't speak up. It's just not what needs to happen to solve the problem. And so I just feel like this is a time where I need to kind of talk from my heart about where we're coming from as a family, where we're coming from as an organization, because I think, honestly, things have got to change. And it starts with moms and dads and families coming together and saying, okay, as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. And what does that mean? And early on in starting the Dream Center, we were trying to figure out what it meant. And we started out with, we were going to reach out to the hurting and the hopeless and do everything we can to make their lives better. And over the years, that's kind of morphed into every Arkansan chasing their God-given dream. And the truth of the matter is that over these years, that morphed because mostly I learned a lot. I learned a lot of things that I was doing wrong. I learned a lot of things that we were doing wrong. I learned a lot of things that had to change in order to see the world change. Not the world change the way I think it should, but the way God wants it to be. And one of the first stories is about a young girl that we met. And I'm not going to share her name because this is kind of out on blast, but she was probably 11 or 12 at the time we met her. And she had 3 big brothers, and there was chaos in her house all the time. And me, coming from the outside world, coming from growing up with a family with money, growing up in a white family, growing up in Conway that is more of a white community, I assumed I knew what was going on in this little girl's life. I assumed that her brothers were hurting her because mom would get locked in the closet and these crazy things would happen. And during that same time, I was praying to God that song, Lord, break my heart for what breaks yours. And I never will forget one day DHS came to the door of the Dream Center and they said, we need this young girl and her brothers. And we took them home, and I watched as DHS took this family and they took the little girl and the brothers, what they could carry in their arms, put them in a van, and they were off into foster care. And they put the mom in handcuffs and hauled her off. And I sat there and I was in shock over what was going on because I told the DHS caseworker I was protecting her from these brothers and their friends. And he said, you were protecting her from the wrong thing. I was protecting her from my assumptions. I was protecting her from what I thought was wrong. But I never asked the question what was really wrong. I never got in there and went deep. And as I drove home that night, I stopped on the side of the road and cried hysterically because I'd failed. I'd failed as a father. I'd failed as a husband. I'd failed as this great ministry that was coming down into this community to make all this change because I knew the answers. When the real truth is I knew nothing because I didn't ask. And I think it's very important for us to realize is that the first thing to bring about change is shutting your mouth and listening.
Babe, can I say something?
Yeah.
I remember when this happened, it just radically changed your perspective on everything, especially the ministry. And I remember how you changed to, what can I do for you? What do you need? How can I help you? How can I be of assistance? Instead of, I'm going to give you this because I think you need it. I'm going to do this because I think that's what will help you. It was just tell me what you need and tell me how I can help you.
And it had to change to that because the truth of the matter is is I grew up one way, and this little girl grew up another way, and I couldn't relate. All of my education at one of the top schools in this state, the great parenting I had, all the resources under the sun, couldn't make up for asking that one question. What's really going on? How can I serve you? What can I do for you? And I think that moment did define who I am. And I tell the staff all the time, you got to ask. I might drive you crazy sometimes. It's like we got to ask more questions. We got to figure some things out. We've got to back up and get to know the situation and not assume anything. Mm-hmm. I remember one of the first men I met on when we came out. It was the first Saturday I'd started Adopt a Block. His name was Earl Williams, and his daughter, I think it was Connie or Corrine, and both of them are now dead. But they were on the corner right beside where the old Dream Center house was, and they were in the nicest brick house in the neighborhood. And I walked up to the door and I asked, we're in the community, we want to do something. I said, is there anything we can do for you? And he said, come in. And that was strange. I just got invited into someone's home. And he sat there for 2 hours and just talked to me. And at the age of 37 years old, that was the first time I've ever sat with a black man and listened to his story. And it was amazing about how he had fought in World War II. My grandfather fought in World War II. How he was one of the few African American soldiers that actually fought in the battles. And about how proud he was of his daughter because she went to college. Well, college in my life was you had to. College in his life was the pinnacle of accomplishing that next level of success for his family. And as I sat there and I listened to him, I changed there because this was a man who grew up in this neighborhood. And he told me, I built this house out of bricks because I saw what happened to the old wood houses that just vanished, that just disintegrated. I take care of this house because this is mine. This is something I own. And it was just this righteous pride because here is a man who had everything stacked against him and he wasn't going to let it hold him back. And I learned so much that day just about the struggles that he went through. I mean, he worked for a prominent family in Little Rock, raising their children for them at the detriment of his own children. And that's why college was so important because he saw that's what those families wanted for their kids. And his story just broke my heart because it was just, I'm like, I had this my whole life and you've fought for it your whole life. Mm-hmm. I was just given it on a silver platter and he struggled every day. And it just made me realize there's so much more out there in Arkansas than I ever imagined. And it just opened my eyes to once again listening, asking that question. And the truth of the matter is I would not be where I am today, doing what I am today, if I didn't love the people I'm serving. Right. I would be burned out. I would be frustrated. I would have quit. Mm-hmm. But the truth of the matter is when you get in there and you get to know someone, all of a sudden your perspective shifts. You no longer look at them as what you're told your whole life to look at them as. You look at them as a person, an equal, not a lesser than or an other than, but you. Right. You look at them as your family. And so much of the time, people get frustrated because we call them our Dream Center kids. Mm-hmm. Because that's how we feel. These are our kids that we were put here in this place to protect. Right. We know their stories. We know their mama's stories. We know their daddy's stories. We know their life history. And they might as well be my daughter who's sitting across the room right now. They might as well be her. Mm-hmm. Because I know almost as much about them as I know about my own child. And that's where we've got to get. That's the way it's got to change to bring all of this home, to start correcting some of these things, is we've got to quit assuming we know what's going on. And we've got to start asking the questions. We've got to start saying, hey, I'm Drew. How are you? To people that we normally wouldn't ever talk to people that we normally wouldn't ever visit with, to people that aren't like us, don't look like us, don't live in a house like us. Because here's the truth. God created each and every one of us uniquely and in his image.
And beautifully.
And beautifully. From the most broken to the most put together, God has something beautiful inside of everyone. And when we start looking at that and we start going back to the baseline of how God created all of us, and we say, I want to know you. Because if God thinks you're special, I need to appreciate that. Mm-hmm. And to me, I think that's the first step that this country needs in healing, is we've got to get to know people, we've got to get to ask the questions, and we've got to shut up and just listen. Because what I will tell you is that in every broken person I meet, there's something beautiful.
Yeah, as I'm listening to you, babe, it's been so overwhelming these last few weeks, and I love what I'm hearing because there is so much beauty in all of us. There's beauty in the outside. There's beauty on the inside. So much that God wants to show us and grow us and teach us through each other, and we're missing out. And I don't want to miss out, and I don't want my family to miss out. I want us to. I want things to change, and to respect and love each other as we do ourselves, just like the Word tells us. I'm thankful to be a part of this. I'm thankful to be a part of this change as much as I can possibly be. And I am for loving your neighbor as yourself.
I think that is a very critical thing, because when you start looking at the words of Jesus, he simplified everything down to two things. Love the Lord your God with everything you got, and love your neighbor as yourself. And over the last few weeks, we've heard the Good Samaritan preached 1,000,000 times. And I think the most important thing to remember is the ones that overlooked the hurting person were the religious. In my case,
right.
We Christians, we people that think we've got it all together. And the truth of the matter is, it was the sinner. It was that person that was out there that wasn't following after Jesus that loved on this hurting person best. And I think what God's saying is that if even someone that doesn't know me gets this, how much more should we get this? Because we know that God came and died for us.
Right.
He came and sacrificed for us. A perfect Jesus. He was tried. He was convicted. All these things happened to him, including he was murdered for our sake.
All of our sake.
And how much more important is it for us to realize that if he is willing to go through that injustice, that sacrifice, that pain, how much more we should be willing to sacrifice and to go through whatever it takes to love our neighbor,
yes.
to love those around us. And quit saying that, oh, well, the person to my right or the person to my left is my neighbor. No, neighbor is every breathing, living
That's
human
right.
being on this planet. There's a verse in Proverbs, and it's 18:19, and it says, an offended friend is harder to win back than a fortified city. Arguments separate friends like a gate locked with bars. And for so many years, we have hurt. We have hurt our neighbor. We have hurt our friends. We have definitely hurt those that we call enemies or those that are different. And what it's going to require right now is more.
And babe, I was just thinking we've also hurt just by making the wrong assumptions.
Yeah.
Again, just by speaking things that we assume are correct or want to be heard, and we don't even know. We're just wrong because we don't understand and we haven't been there. Even if it's coming from a good place, we don't understand and we don't know. And we hurt them. We hurt people when we speak on their behalf because we think we know.
Yeah. And I think it's one of those things Martin Luther King says, in the end, we'll remember not the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends. Anita Phillips says, don't talk about it, be about it. It's got to be more than what we're doing. It's got to be getting out there. And that's what I love about what happens at the Dream Center. We start getting to know someone, and it's on a surface level. Sometimes it's the most surface level, and it's like, this makes no sense. Why are we investing this time? Because we always say it's a scale. Whoever spends the most time with someone's going to win the battle of influence. If we want to see people come to know Jesus, we've got to spend time with them. If we want to see people become successful, we've got to spend time with them. And that goes for us too. I look at my life, and my father was able to put around me people that spoke into my life, that had influence, that were positive in nature, and helped me grow and helped me learn and helped me do things. And when we're not willing to be that chosen vessel, when invited, don't just go out there and offer advice, but to make ourselves vulnerable to that, that can change the world. And it started with us at the Dream Center. And I remember Abby, our oldest daughter, who's now 20, was 11 or 12 at the time, and we would knock on doors and ask, what can we do for you? And people would look at us and say, what? They literally did not know what to think when we'd knock on the door. And they'd look around, and the first thing they would say, trash. There's a lot of trash on the ground. And I think this is like Jesus washing the feet of his disciples. We, in order to have a relationship with a person, have to be willing to do anything and everything. We have to humble ourselves. Oh, I'm this great teacher, or oh, I'm this great theologian, or oh, I'm this great whatever. We have to come into the reality and say, I'll pick up trash.
Sure.
And what was amazing about this is the first families we got to know, we picked up their yards. We picked up their trash. I remember Tyler and Larry. We went over there and we cleared all their mama's fence lines. We did these things that everyone that was out there was like, why do we keep doing these things? When are we going to start teaching the Bible? When are we going to start doing these things? And the truth of the matter is, it goes back to that verse in Proverbs. We have hurt so many people, and the fences are up. The walls are up. And I can list lots of people right now.
Understandably so.
That I'm going to protect myself from. I'm going to say that I can't trust them. I'm going to do that. And it's going to take years and years and years for them to break that down. And the only way it's going to happen is if they humble themselves and do something. And that's what I love about our staff. That's what I love about our volunteers. They just really get down and they say, I'm just going to love on this kid. I remember there's one of our kids that can't read well, and a volunteer that came in that wanted to work with the worst readers, and it was all of this. But that man's willingness just to sit there and read with this kid, and then sit there and read with this kid when this kid didn't want to, and sit there and read with this kid when this kid was crying, and sit there and read with this kid when this kid says, I can't read. All these, he just kept showing up day after day with consistency. That kid is now reading on grade level, but beyond that, that kid is reading with other kids.
Right.
That kid is making a difference because someone showed consistency. Someone said, I'm going to show up, and I'm going to keep showing up, and I'm going to do whatever it takes to love on you through the pain, through this, through that, and things change. I think one of the things, and this is another story, that I worked in finance in downtown, and there were a lot of homeless. And back in the day, when I would see a homeless person, I would walk to the other side of the street. I would do whatever it took to avoid them because I didn't want to hear their problems. I didn't want to listen to them. They were drunk. They were high. Whatever assumptions I had. And one of the things that changed my world was when I got to know guys who were experiencing homelessness. And I started to realize they're just like me. There was one choice, one thing. And in everything that we do at the Dream Center, the one thing I love most is the fact that we create opportunities to where two people that otherwise never would have sat at the same table and had a meal, they never would have had a conversation, they never would have met each other in the real world, can sit down, they can have coffee, they can have a meal, they can read, they can do whatever it is they do, and they can get to know each other. And they can get on the same playing field. Because I think sometimes what's happened, and it's even in marriage, you're out here playing football and I'm over here playing basketball, and it's two totally different worlds that are going on, and we're not on the same field.
Right.
And I think what's so important is when we get on that same field, when we're both getting to know each other and we're getting in a relationship, something beautiful happens. And that's what I want to encourage everyone who's out there who's just saying, okay, I've got to be a part of the solution. I've got to do something to make some change, because I don't think that you can change something until you name something. You've got to identify that, okay, I'm lacking here. It starts with you. I can't look at you and say, babe, you've got this going on, you got to fix it. No, I've got to say, okay, what can I fix? Because that's within my control. I've got to put myself out there, and I've got to ask the hard questions, and I've got to be willing to take the hard answers so that I can change. Because that's all we can control is ourselves. And that's what's so beautiful about what happens here. My whole world, my direction, everything I do, you've known me since I was a little bitty kid, is totally different because I said, I'm going to ask these questions. What can I do for you? I got on the same playing field with a group of people that I otherwise wouldn't have, and it changed me. It helped me understand what's going on in their lives. It helped me become a better person for my family, a better husband to you. It helped me become a better follower of Jesus, because really, what did Jesus do? He wandered around and he just talked to people, and he loved on people on their level, where they were, in their conditions, in their world. And what happened in the end is he brought his world to them, and their lives changed. And what we oftentimes want with people is we want them to come to our world. And that's not how Jesus did it.
Yes, babe, when I think about you, because I have known you pretty much your entire life and vice versa, you radically different. The person that I knew and that I married, actually, is a radically different person than this one that I'm looking at right now. And
way more handsome.
Way more handsome. And I would not change that for anything. And the difference is that you have grown in your relationships, learned from different people. You have, just what you're saying, you have developed relationships with all different ethnicities, and you have grown and learned, and you are such a better person for it. And I want everyone to experience that. I have some of the most beautiful, wonderful women of color who have been alongside me, who have prayed for me and my family, and I'm a better person. I've learned so much, and I'm a better person for that, and I want that for everyone.
And that's the heart of who we are as a family and as a ministry. We want to see every Arkansan, regardless of their socioeconomic background, regardless of their skin color, regardless of their religion, regardless of their education. We want to see them chasing their God-given dream. Because I think it's God who's going to change their life.
Right.
Not Drew Davis, not Kristi, no matter how miraculous she is. I think it's God that's going to change lives. And when we get rid of the God complex and we start chasing our dreams together, something miraculous really happens.